thanks to all our supporters, including your local community radio station, Suzette Cullen, and Genevieve Vaughn, author of the book The Gift in the Heart of Language, The Maternal Source of Meaning. The Wings sound logo is from Libana's album A Circle is Cast. I'm Wings series producer Frida Worden. This is the Women's International News Gathering Service.
The night.
Well, good afternoon. Welcome to the Road to Recovery, the Road to Freedom with Mark. This is my 28-minute slot every Friday where I talk a bit about mental health, which is my pet subject, and read one of my stories. From my adventures around New Zealand and overseas, I spent 7.5 years in Southeast Asia, Africa and Europe, and had some wild times. But today's story is a special story about a very special place, in fact, in the Wairarapa, out at Tora. I lived out there for a year and did commercial fishing because I have been determined all my life never to die wondering, to always follow my dreams and the things that I consider important and worthy and interesting. And I have been fishing since I was a child, 3 years old, and that's over 50 years now. And I have fished all around New Zealand, and I really, really wondered what it would be like to work on a commercial boat, because it was very interesting to me, and I loved spending time with fishermen. What they talk about, the way they live their life is very, very unique. And I find it's very good for your mental health, if you are suffering from depression, as I do, to get out, either on the sea or on land in the bush. But I find getting out amongst nature is very therapeutic. You'd be surprised how it puts your soul at peace and calms your mind. When you have a very busy mind, you sit at home in your room and you think about things, and if you suffer from mental illness, your mind tortures you, and you live in a world of pain and regret. So it is very good to get out and go for a walk or a cycle or a ride on a boat and just get out amongst things. And I found, although fishing was extremely physically arduous, so tough, I would be doubled over, bent, almost broken after 3 days of fishing. But it was very, very good for my mental health, and it was a magic time. I loved every moment of being there, but I hated the work so much, and I only lasted a year. It was beyond me physically, but it was a year that gave me 3 or 4 good stories which will remain with me forever in those memories, and a time that I really, really enjoyed. Thank you, Stu McNeil, my great old mate who I've known since I was a youngster, and a woman that I really loved, Shirley Taylor, his wife. She died in our arms, me and Stu. She whacked out, and, you know, that will haunt me forever. But, you know, we had some great times, and today is one of those stories from there. So let's crack on with that. And I've got a pretty amazing song to play to you today. You would have heard of it before, but you would not know. I very much doubt that you would know who the Pixies are. But to my mind, the second most influential band in rock and roll after the Beatles, and truly amazing band. Some of their stuff is just garbage, but some of it is magnificent, and I will play you one of them this afternoon. Right, let's crack on with the story. This is called Pieces of Silver. The old mate, who I'll refer to as Tom for short, woke me about 4:30 a.m. one morning in spring. I was staying in a large caravan out the back of his place. We were in the middle of fishing for groper and had a few more tons to land. I sprung out of bed as I knew we had a big day ahead of us. Work clothes were hurriedly pulled on, and I stumbled into the darkness towards the flat deck ute. "All right, mate," said Tom as he handed me a coffee and fired up the ute. We headed up to the refrigerated container that holds boxes of bait and took 6 for the day's fishing. Then we loaded up 140 litres of diesel from the main tank and headed down the road to the bulldozer and the boat. It was still dark when we arrived and filled the tanks and stowed the gear. I put on my all-weather overalls and started cutting baits. Kuda frozen whole is easiest filleted solid, but it freezes the hands fast. Despite the numbness and the razor-sharp blade, I worked as fast as I could go. We needed 300 baits of kuda and squid prepared before we reached the fishing grounds. It would take my best efforts to be ready on time, and Tom would accept no excuses. Right on the first hint of light, Tora drove over on his quad bike, ready to back the boat into the sea, using a large metal cradle and a D9 Caterpillar bulldozer. The drawbar connecting the bulldozer to the cradle was about 15 metres, so we were able to get in deep enough water from the beach. But beach launches are never easy. Still, he backs us into the water with a great puff of black smoke and some consummate skill. Tom kicks over the 2 D4 Caterpillar engines on board, and they bark into life on demand. He listens carefully as he warms up the motors for any hint of a problem which must be addressed before we head out. With nothing obviously untoward, he engages the twin Hamilton jets they drive and swings us round to face the ocean. Meanwhile, it's back to baits for me. Head down, but the smell is quite bearable, as everything we use has been frozen fresh, and fresh is the key. Tom goes through the motions of checking the gear, first the electronics, then the jets, then a knowing eye over the hauling gear, and finally over me and the hundreds of traces behind me that we will be sending to the bottom in a few hours. Happy that all is in order, Tom opens up the motors and puts on some Johnny Cash as he plots a path down to the fishing grounds. I feel the boat's bow rise to the challenge and try to move in rhythm with her so as not to slice my hands, now rather numb. Tom buries his head in the navigational gear after putting on the kettle, and I have a tiny break as I make the coffee. The sun is rising magnificently today, and it lights up the gnarly coastal cliffs, all orange, red and blue, with wisps of mist still licking the gullies. We have only a few minutes to take in the view before it's back to toil. For after cutting a few hundred baits, the traces must be baited up and laid out ready for later on. We lose no time as the engines roar on and the jets push us along at a good 30 knots. It's not easy getting all the baits ready in time, but I battle on and check all the main lines, floats, anchors, clips, traces and ropes in sequence, exactly how Tom showed me. Everything must run like clockwork, or it could cost us in gear, injury, or even our lives, and this is the most dangerous occupation there is. Satisfied that all is in order, I report briefly to my skipper, and he glances over everything himself for satisfaction. "That's good. Now cut some more baits, would you?" is all he has to say, then turns his attention back to the engines and electronics. Out here, our roles are very much changed, and it is important we function as a unit. Tom becomes the skipper, and must make decisions quickly and without impedance. I must follow orders with understanding and as quickly as possible. No hesitation or misunderstanding can be tolerated, or the consequences could be dire for us both. At times, this necessity tests both patience and friendship, but we both approach it from the angle of understanding, so we can work safely and quickly together. The hours pass so quickly, I scarcely have time to have all ready as we arrive on the grounds we call the holes. They are a series of cliff faces rising steeply from the abyss, a place where current is naturally churned up by the changing tides. We have coincided our arrival with the turning of the tide, a time when countless billions of plankton rise from the depths of night time to photosynthesize during the morning. They turn the sea a beautiful green with their vast numbers and fill our hearts with expectation. The timing of our arrival is crucial, and the tides are erratic, influenced by more subtle forces than the moon alone. Old skippers, now long gone, taught Tom the secrets of this place decades ago when the Italians and Greeks fished these places. Now that they're gone, Tom is one of the last with the knowledge which is the crucial difference between success and failure. We cannot see the plankton on the fish finding gear, the electronics not being sensitive enough. But what preys on them is clearly evident. With a jaw-dropping clarity, we see 15 to 25 metres deep of an uncountable swarm of tiny fish of many different species, following up and feeding on the tiny plankton. Most of these fish are never seen by humans, and much of their lives remains a mystery, as this is a truly wild and far-flung corner of the world. What feed on them is our glittering prize, our pieces of silver. Groper are our target species today, fishing in a depth of approximately 250 metres. Above them are bluenose, a delectable but less valuable species we will also take, and below the groper are bass, a related if somewhat uglier species. The bass are every bit as good to eat and pay the same good money. The more groper we catch, however, the happier we will be. 100 fish for the day is our unspoken rule for a really good day, but they are few and far between. Today looks especially good. Alrighty, just take a little bit of a break now and I'll treat you to something special. Here we go. Where is my mind? That angelic voice at the end of that was Kim Deal. Pretty amazing stuff, eh? Where is my mind? That is a question I ask myself quite often. Yep, amazing stuff, the Pixies. Right, before we crack back on, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Michael and Veronica down here for supporting me for all these years. They do a wonderful job down here at Arrow Radio, and it's something utterly unique, you know. I'd never even heard of Arrow before, and once I got involved in this, I thought, wow, why do people not know about this? This is an amazing thing. And since then, Wairarapa TV have come along and jumped on board and just made it that much more special. But unfortunately, we don't have a sponsor for the show, and I would really, really like to get a sponsor and ensure the survival of the show, because I think it's a worthwhile thing. It's therapeutic for me because, I get to talk to others, and because I can verbalise it, it in some way heals me, and that's a wonderful thing. And, it's really good that Michael and Veronica have supported me and believed in me for all this time. I really do appreciate that so much. But fact is, we need a sponsor. So if you want to sponsor the show, wham, all power to you. If you know of anybody who is interested, it's pretty cheap. Just give them a phone call. They'll give you all the details. You don't have to sponsor the whole show. Just chip in, part sponsorship. You'll get a mention on the show. There are podcasts, so you will be on the internet. Wairarapa TV, you're going to be all over the radio, the computer, the airwaves, wham, the whole 9 yards, and it's cheap as. And what's more is you're doing a great service for a not-for-profit organisation that does amazing work in the community and gives people a voice that they otherwise would not have, people like me. And I hope you think that that's a very worthwhile thing. I certainly do. It's an amazing thing to do. It's a real privilege. It's a real honour. I love it. And I hope you like my stories, and maybe what I have to say is provocative, thought-provoking. I certainly hope so. I do my best. Right, so sponsorship, please. If you can help, don't do what you must. Do what you should. Thank you. Right, let's crack on. This is Pieces of Silver. Tom snoops around with his electronic gear, cruising slowly over the cliff faces as the sonar shows signs of promise everywhere. We're in no rush at this point, as timing is everything. We must have our baits at exactly the right place and depth to get amongst our prize, so we must sum up our line of attack before we move. During this time, the most incredible transition begins to take place. Until now, we have been tracked by the great royal albatross. They have been soaring majestically, high up on the thermals, watching and waiting patiently. Now as we slow, they descend with anticipation of an ensuing feast. And they are only the first wave. Other albatross and mollymawks, a little smaller, arrive on the scene. Half a dozen soon become many dozens of these magnificent masters of the sky. In turn, these attract other ocean-going birds like the painted pigeons, which swim underwater as if they were flying. Within half an hour, we already have a small city of chattering birds moving expectantly before a bait has touched the water. We come around again, along at the now plotted course, and begin fishing in earnest. We start by tying an anchor or pick on the bottom of the main line, then lower this by hand until after a few metres we start clipping on traces with a baited hook at the other end. Each main line takes 25 to 33 baited hooks over some 50 metres in length. The main line in turn is attached to a rope, which is knotted every 50 metres so we can count it out as it descends the depths. This job must be done at breakneck speed, so the anchor finds exactly the right spot on the cliff face where the groper are feeding. Tom must calculate drift as well as drop. Only the experience of many thousands of drops has taught him the right way. As the first drop speeds away, Tom keeps one eye on the sonar as I count out 200 metres of rope, then tie 2 large floats to the rope and send them off to mark the drop. Tom marks it for reference on the plotter. We move to the next cliff face and the procedure starts again, then a third and a fourth. By the time we have finished 4 drops and stopped for a coffee, it's time to go back to the beginning and start hauling. I hook up the large floats over the davit arm and Tom engages the hydraulic hauler. As the rope tenses up, we can feel the groper wriggling on the ends. The myriad of birds seems to anticipate the action as the first few hooks come up empty. Tom unclips the traces and I remove the now used baits and throw them overboard to the noisy waiting birds. But soon we see colour, and 6 beautiful silver grey groper float to the surface, each weighing about 10 kilos. Tom unclips them and I remove the hooks so they can be gutted immediately. We rebait and drop the line again and slowly motor up to the next line as Tom expertly removes their heads with great thwacks of his large knife. He then slices their bellies open and quickly removes all the guts from the beasts and hurls it overboard, and pandemonium breaks out amongst the birds. The huge royal albatross barge their way in, using their hooked beaks to tear at the large livers and other offal before it sinks down. Small groups of squabbling birds are left in our wake, and smaller birds pick off what they can from the albatross. The second line is more successful, and a dozen groper come up, and I am soon hard at work on my knees, flushing out blood from the carcasses with the seawater hose and cleaning off any remaining guts. I am soon covered in blood and guts, but I ignore it as this slowly turns into a good day's catch. The third line is better still, with some 20 fish landing on deck, and we increase the pace. The fish are going down the hold as quickly as I can manage, but I have trouble keeping up the pace as Tom hews and hacks at a mighty rate. At least 3 dozen albatross are now squabbling and gorging themselves as we resemble a city of birds on the water. A fourth line, which promises to make our day, starts to come up, then straightens and slows, then starts again. Tom and I shoot each other worried glances as we hesitate. We stare down into the depths for answers as the first hooks come up, straightened out, as if some massive fish have torn both fish and hooks from the traces. A few more great tugs, and it dawns upon us that we are being robbed. We stare down into the green depths for answers, and slowly the huge black shape of a whale comes into view, plucking the groper off the hooks like a bunch of grapes. Stunned at the audacity of these creatures, we are mesmerised for a minute as we are helpless to respond. "Dirty, rotten bastards," swears Tom under his breath, as the pod of whales starts to ascend, their black and white markings coming into view. Due to their great bulk, our little hooks have no effect on them, and they are free to rob us at will. "Get the gear as quick as you can," shouts Tom, concerned that we might snag up on a whale and lose some gear. At the same time, I see another whale come up behind us. At 15 metres, it is as long as our boat, and it floats right up to the stern, almost touching the jet with its nose. "Pilot whales," informs Tom, as I stare, as captivated by this great beast as he is with our boat. We then break into action to retrieve our gear as quickly as possible. As we do so, it becomes obvious that we have been defeated in our efforts, not by the elements or our elusive prey, but a pod of robbing whales. All 4 lines have been similarly decimated, so we are forced to retrieve gear and pack it away as the whales hover all around, checking us out. They are so close we can see their eyes, and I cannot help but think there is some undeniable intelligence behind them. What should have been a successful day of at least 100 groper has suddenly been curtailed into only 38 slabs of valuable silver. We managed to retrieve all the gear safely and are forced to turn for home early, beaten by our curious company. We make it back to the landing by midday, and seeking solace in the fact that we have at least made wages for the day, but rue the fact it could have been so much better. We will be back there soon to try our luck again, as this was a rare meeting with these Goliaths of the deep. Still, it was an experience that will stay in our minds for years to come. The end. Well, look at that. Whammo. 1 minute to spare. I love that. I don't know how these stories ended up being the perfect size, but they are. And boy, that brought back some good memories. Not so much the being robbed by whales, but I remember so clearly looking that whale in the eye and just thinking, you are a smart bugger, aren't you, eh? A master of the sea. Yeah, an amazing time out at Tora, and, you know, it would be so great just to have loads of money and live out there. It is a really magnificent part of the country. Well, that's me for another week. So remember what I said. If you know anyone who wants to sponsor the show, please just ring Arrow Radio, speak to Michael or Veronica. They are lovely people, and they'll be only too happy to help. Thanks very much. I hope you enjoyed the show, and we will continue again next week. So look out for me. Tell your friends. Tune in, enjoy. I really love bringing these stories to you, so we'll do it all again next week. Ciao for now.